We're sponsored today by Forward Networks. Enterprises rely on Forward Networks' network digital twin for unified, trusted automation across distributed hybrid networks. Forward Networks' network digital twin ensures connectivity isn't disrupted, security posture is unchanged, and compliance is maintained at all stages of change management. Forward Networks' digital twin is the difference between risky automation and operational certainty. Learn more about how to protect your network and your sanity with Forward Networks at forwardnetworks.com/packetpushers.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Packet Protector, the podcast at the intersection of networking and security. I'm Jennifer J.J. Manella here with Drew Conry Murray, and today is our news roundup. On today's show, we're going to talk about end-of-life D-Link routers being exploited, a 5-year-old patched Fortinet vulnerability still being exploited, a clever attack chain targeting the hospitality industry but could apply to you, a troubling botnet going after home networks, an IoT security initiative running into a trust issues of itself, and a few fun items at the back end of the episode and more.
Yeah, so we're going to dig into a story from Brian Krebs, which he's calling an urgent internet-wide security advisory regarding home networks. We'll talk about a KVM you might want to avoid, how case sensitivity mismatches are leading to 2FA bypasses, and 2 OAuth-related Microsoft credential attacks that also bypass MFA. A lot to talk about, so let's dive in.
Yeah. Now, Drew, there's one other question that our audience has.
Yes?
How was your holiday break?
Oh, right. It was good. It was so good that it took us, JJ, a while to kind of get back up to speed on doing the show. That's how good it was. How about you?
Yeah, similar. I worked most not like in an unreasonable, but I've got some new projects happening and new training launching this year. But so my other question for you is, are you a resolutions person? Did you set any resolutions or intentions for the year?
Not explicitly, other than to just try to keep doing the things that I know I should be doing, keep doing them. Yeah. Do you have anything specific for this year? Like, we all know where we need to improve. And so it's at my age now, it's like, yep, just keep trying, dude.
I think, I feel the same way. I don't really do resolutions, but I do try to be more intentional about certain things and do the things that we should do.
We've recorded this intro at the end, just so a little insider tip. But we're also going to talk about a little bit about grace, extending grace to our cybersecurity colleagues.
And how much nicer I am than Drew is? No, I'm kidding. Only sometimes.
Not disputed. Not disputed.
All right. Well, let's check out the news.
Yeah, so let's dive in. And just I wanted to mention we got some listener follow up on the story we covered at the end of last year about an internet-connected toilet camera and whether or not it was using end-to-end encryption. Appreciate the follow-up, and the guest made the follow-up sender made some really interesting and funny comments, but JJ and I are also sick of talking about the internet-connected toilet camera, so we're just going to leave it. But we do love your follow-up, and if you have questions, concerns, comments, whatever, packetpushers.net/follow-up, so please do reach out. All right, let's dive into the news first. Router maker D-Link has confirmed active exploits against some older models of its router gateway devices. All of the affected models are end of life or end of service, so D-Link is not releasing a patch or software update to address the vulnerability that enables the exploit. Instead, D-Link says customers using the affected model should replace the devices with new models. JJ, any thoughts?
Well, I mean, probably the same thoughts everybody has, which is I feel like everybody has D-Link stuff somewhere. I mean, even in enterprise environments, they're always just somebody needed something somewhere and there's a D-Link, out at the edge, adding ports somewhere. But it does look like, these are their DSL routers. So that's a very specific, model series and a very specific use case. But I think the challenge with these things is, this type of news doesn't usually make it down to the people that are using these things actively. So maybe this is one of those tell your friends and family, check around, if you have people that own small businesses or you've got stuff floating around, this is a good time to kind of, check in with your neighbors a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. There are specific models with specific firmware versions that are affected. I don't want to read them out because it would be boring, but we'll have those links in the show notes.
You thought that would be boring? You don't want to read out this long list of affected models. It's actually only 4. Yeah. But these are, I mean, if they are in use and they're on the internet because they're DSL routers, this is a command injection attack. It is a serious attack. It is. A remote execution. So do fix it.
Yeah, and I feel like this is going to be a theme today in terms of like sort of prosumer stuff, end of life stuff, configuration stuff, just needing to be tended to.
Yeah, it's a good time. We're in a new year. It's a fresh start. Get the old crap out of there.
You should take a dust broom to all of your old gear.
Yeah, instead of spring cleaning, this should be like New Year's cleaning.
Exactly. All right, links in the show notes. We'll move on. Security researchers at Securonics are warning of a clever hacking campaign that targets hotel employees. The campaign's blending phishing, social engineering, and privilege escalation to trick employees into downloading remote access Trojans on Windows machines. I'll give you a quick summary of how it works. It starts with a phishing email that purports to come from Booking.com. This is a popular site widely used in the hotel industry, and the email has some kind of alarming message like I want to cancel my reservation. The goal, of course, is to get the hotel worker to click on a button for more details. If they do click, they're connected to a website controlled by the attacker. It looks like they have landed on Booking.com, but it's a site controlled by the attacker. The attacker then displays what looks like a Microsoft blue screen of death to make it look like the employer's PC has just crashed. It hasn't. It's just a fake screen. From there, the attacker runs a series of steps to trick the user into running a PowerShell script. Once installed, that PowerShell script then uses several techniques to modify rules in Windows Defender or disable it outright so that the attacker can then remotely install a Trojan on a device. And JJ, when I was reading this report, I was like, well, what if the employee isn't running as admin? They wouldn't be able to modify or disable Defender. Well, guess what? The attackers thought of that. One of the files downloaded uses multiple techniques to either disable Defender or get the user to escalate their credentials so the attacker software can then shut down the security software. Thoughts?
Yeah, at first I was like, okay, just another, thing. And then I read the whole, so it was Securonics, and I read, their whole, I highly recommend everybody listening go read this because, we're talking about a very specific string of attacks from, malicious actors that are targeting, specific users in a specific geography in a specific industry. However, if you look through the screenshots, this attack would work on anybody. I would have clicked on this.
Yeah.
It's extremely, I think the only part when it gets into, the blue screen of death where it says your PC ran into the problem, which does look like a legitimate blue screen of death, by the way.
Uh-huh.
It has some instructions to the user to like hold Windows R and then, Control V, et cetera, et cetera. I think any of us that are, savvy IT, any Windows users would understand that that's not normal restart and troubleshooting behavior. However, a typical user is not. Right. And, to your point about the admin rights, I was reading kind of the path of that, and they do a lot of things to kind of force escalation, but then if they don't get it, the tool is still there. And so, it's still dangerous. It's basically instead of, being able to take over the entire endpoint, they're still able to execute full credential theft of Microsoft creds. So, I was kind of looking at this. There's another attack I think we're going to hit if we get down into the rapid fire section. That's the consent fix type thing, which is kind of similar. So
hijacking OAuth.
Yeah. So basically the shift, like we've had these, multi-factor, I'm going to call them injections, like attacker in the middle kind of thing, where they're doing a legitimate auth and they're kind of sticking themselves in the middle of the two-factor component of it. But this doesn't even this bypasses all of that. So if a user logs in with Microsoft 365 credentials, legitimately this path can steal the consent fix can steal that. Some tokens in that string. This similarly gets those credentials and identity, and then can do all kinds of things. Like, one of the biggest paths that I see is this, being able to register malicious Entra apps, because a lot of organizations, if you don't have somebody paying attention to this, you don't know you have to go in there and prevent, anybody and everybody in your environment from being able to register apps and then do crazy stuff, because when those apps come in, they hook into the whole environment. So effectively, this one compromise can lead to a full, Entra ID, Microsoft 365, Azure compromise.
Yeah, and I think as you mentioned, right now they're targeting the hospitality sector, but it's not working off of a specific exploit. It's not trying to target a specific vulnerability. This is with, working machines, and you could adjust this attack chain to work in any particular sector, like healthcare, to be like, what's a common website that healthcare employees use? You can spoof that and so on. So this could find its way into other sectors outside of hospitality. It's a really clever and sort of disturbingly well executed attack.
Yeah. I do want to also just call out this one little factoid here. All of these articles keep using BSOD for blue screen of death.
Mm-hmm.
So just, back to the, is it cyber or is it kink? That's cyber. We're good. And I think they're calling it, so I was looking at the hashtag because it's the hashtag for this attack string is PHALT pound BLYX.
Mm-hmm.
So is it faulty something Blix?
Fault pound Blix?
Fault.
I don't know. Fault hashtag Blix?
Fault. Yeah. I don't know. Anyway, if you know the answer to that, please let us know.
Yes. Links in the show notes, and yeah, absolutely read the blog from Secure Onyx. They did a really good job. It's very informative and it could help you get your card up.
Yeah.
Moving along, a U.S. government initiative to provide cybersecurity labeling of IoT devices to help consumers decide if they can trust an IoT product has now run into trust issues of its own. This program, called Cyber Trust Mark, was developed by the Botnet administration. The program developed a set of security criteria for home IoT devices. The idea was then private labs would test the devices to ensure they met these criteria, and then vendors could apply the Cyber Trust Mark label to the product, so somebody in a store can be like, oh, I want the one that has the trust mark on it. Again, to help consumers make more informed choices about the cyber safety of IoT devices. And I think also to help spur the industry, like a carrot, like, hey, develop your product more securely, do some good basics, and you can get this mark. So a U.S. company called UL, or Underwriters Laboratory, was chosen by the Biden administration as the lead testing lab to sort of oversee this process. Then the FCC under the Trump administration announced an investigation into the UL's partnership in a Chinese company and the fact that UL has labs in China. The results of that investigation, to my knowledge, have not been published, but it was enough that UL has withdrawn itself from the program. The FCC has now opened a 2-week window to solicit applications for a new lead administrator.
I think we touched on this several weeks ago during one of the news stories, maybe, or at least we it was on the run sheet. I don't know if we made it down there. And this is one of those that I feel very torn on. So, and for anybody listening, if like, I'm not like, I hate politics. I don't like political parties. I don't.
Is this your political trigger warning?
Yeah, like it's. I don't like any of them. So I'm not like pro. I'm not like, oh, if this person does it, it's always good or it's always bad. Mm-hmm. So I look at this and there's, it could be good, it could be bad. If there is actually, a connection between UL and China that would interfere with their ability to, to do neutral third-party testing, then this is warranted, and I'm glad somebody's looking at it, because I think a lot of us just, UL is stamped on every piece of electronic I think we've ever bought here. So
yeah.
I would look at that and just blindly go, well, yes, I trust them because they're doing the safety testing for, everything else that we have.
Yep.
But I don't, blind trust is not good. So looking into things is good. Now, I think what will be interesting and telling is if the FCC has opened this up to other companies to kind of be considered, I think, looking down the road when we see who got picked and why, I think that will be more telling as to what was this a legitimate concern around China, or was this, somebody's buddy wanted in on this deal and then this was the way to go about it. And I don't know which way happened. Right now, I don't care. I will care later probably, but it definitely throws a monkey wrench. I mean, the whole Cyber Trust Mark, we've talked about that probably about a year ago. Mm-hmm. We even talked about it, I think, when we had Stephen on from Infineon, because he participates in some of that. So, that by itself, just the whole Cyber Trust Mark program, I'm skeptical. I'm glad we're doing something. I'm glad it forces consumers to pay attention to things. In light of a lot of the other news stories we've had in the past year, it could be valuable.
Yeah.
So I'm just interested to see how this shakes out, because I do think there's a sliver of value in the Cyber Trust Mark program, even though it's not, it's not everything I would want it to be as a security professional, but it's better than nothing.
Right.
So I'd like to see it succeed, I guess, is the short version. And then I hope this is a path towards a more successful program.
Yeah, just some background on UL. They were founded in the U.S., I think, in the late 1800s. They've been doing product safety testing on both consumer and industrial goods for years and years and years and years. And you could say, well, given the number of products that are built in China that get shipped into the U.S., it would make sense for UL to have labs there to make it easier to do the testing. But we are now, as you noted, in a geopolitical environment where any kind of affiliation with China, whether for good reasons or not, is now like a red flag. So that's the environment we're in, and I don't know what to do about that.
Yeah.
Links in the show notes. We will move on, but this is also related to IoT. Security researchers say that more than 2 million devices are now part of the Kimwolf botnet, which is being monetized and rented out for use in things like large-scale DDoS attacks, ad fraud, content scraping, and other malicious behavior. Kimwolf is primarily targeting consumer devices, including Android-based TV streaming boxes that are often used by buyers to pirate content. Digital picture frames with internet connections are also a popular target, also Android-based. Kimwolf is also leveraging residential proxy networks, which let customers route their traffic through a proxy to disguise their point of origin, which makes it harder for your security services and law enforcement to identify the source of these attacks. The upshot, according to security reporter Brian Krebs, who did a deep dive story on this, is that consumers' home networks are at risk of being exploited.
Yeah, okay. So first of all, I want to kind of underscore this a little bit, that, because everybody knows Brian Krebs. He writes a lot of amazing stuff.
Uh-huh.
His underscore of this was that he feels this is an urgent internet-wide security advisory, meaning this is something he feels like, based on his research through a few years into this, that this is something everybody needs to know about and be participating in the solution for. And after reading his write-up, I've read his write-up, it's long. I need to go back and read it a few more times to wrap my head around everything, frankly. But this is pretty serious. So to distill it down, we know that there are these residential proxy networks, which is basically where, an entity, one was called, I think, IP idea or something like that. So then an entity kind of establishes persistence in these consumer devices, typically the edge, like the CPE equipment from your internet provider. And then they rent that out to their customers, which are, usually for various nefarious purposes, although not harmful to, the person whose house it's in, right? It's more like a leech or a parasite, right? They're just kind of using your resources to do other things, not impacting you. So they rent out these, residential proxy connections to whoever wants to use them to do whatever they're going to do, obscure their traffic, distribute their traffic paths, et cetera. That could be used for, we've seen like ad fraud. We've seen those massive denial of service attacks, the distributed denial of service attacks taking down pretty large websites. So there's all kinds of stuff that those could be used for, and none of them are really good. So that's already not great. But now the problem is those residential proxy networks have been allowing certain parties, including whoever's distributing the Kimwolf botnet, to reach inside the residential network. So now we're talking about, that first model where I said the residential proxy, doesn't harm the person in the house where it's installed. It's just kind of leeching and mooching off of the resources and the connectivity. Now this is different, because now these bad actors that are renting, right? So different entity that's renting this access is able to get into the residential equipment and then reach back inside the network to the rest of your stuff inside. They're infecting those things. And that's how Kimwolf has been able to spread so quickly. And one of the things I want to kind of, underscore before I hand it back to you here is, Brian's article starts with kind of talking about, Android-based TV streaming boxes and the digital, but basically it's anything that runs an Android operating system, and then some other operating systems, including Apple, Mac, and Windows to a much lesser degree. So there are also phone apps that people have installed. So if you get further down the article, one of the things that the researchers talk about is, so that this kind of follow-on domino effect of, if you have, at your house, if you have, Wi-Fi and you have a guest come, friend, family member, whatever, and their phone's infected, that's now infected your home network.
Right, they're hopping on your home wireless network,
Yes.
and suddenly,
and then that will
spread to
persist
you.
once they leave. So this is kind of a bigger deal. I mean, some of the stats that Brian's put together and pulled, like something happened to one of the residential proxy networks, things got torn down, and I think it was within like some very short time frame of hours, days, or maybe a week. There were 2 million devices already re-impacted and re-affected from it.
Yeah, I feel like it seems like it wasn't clear to me from reading Brian Krebs' story whether there may be some residential proxy network services that are legitimate. They're not, set up as a front for malicious activity. If you want to disguise your IP for whatever reason because you're into privacy, or maybe because you want to watch Netflix shows that you can't get in the US or whatever, it doesn't seem like a crime. It does seem like, though, some of these residential proxy services are a bit more operating on the shady side. The other part of the picture is, if you're buying, an Android device because you want to pirate stuff, you maybe don't care that you're also part of a botnet. So this seems like a hard problem to tackle.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess you're right, but I guess I give a little bit more grace to people. I think there's lots of cases in the world, in any part of the world, where you've got, an economically depressed area, or a family member who's elderly and can't, isn't or can't pay for, $80 a month of streaming services, and you're trying to help them. And then, digital picture frames are very common.
Absolutely.
I don't use them, but I've been amazed recently at how many people have told me they have them throughout their house. And that's how, and these are IT and security people, like, oh yeah, and I have these, and then my whatever can just upload, photos because it's cloud connected, and I get to see little, Timmy growing up, and I don't have to do anything. So those are pretty prevalent. But again, it could also be just a free game that somebody has downloaded on their phone.
Right. Yeah, that includes this malware. Or includes this capability for them to attach you to the botnet.
Yeah. So,
it's a new year, so I appreciate, JJ, you calling out that we need to extend each other a little bit more grace maybe than we normally do. So thank you.
I'm always I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. I grew up as being like extremely paranoid and skeptical. And I'm just trying to, just be a little more open to, because it's just better for my mental health if I just pretend like most people are good and, they're not malicious. They just sometimes are lacking information to make good decisions. I don't know. But I think the takeaway from this story is, well, first of all, so Synthient, which is, if I remember this correctly, there was a student maybe at Rochester.
It's RIT, yeah. Go Tigers.
Yeah, that was kind of, is at school and is kind of researching this. I don't know if it's on the side or part of a project, but he has this company, Synthient, and basically they've put up a checker. We've got a link in the show notes. So the IP security checker, if you go to synthient.com/check, all it does is it just picks up your public IP address, and then it looks it up on the back end to see if it's in the known database of these various proxy services, legit or not legit services, because this person is in contact with those services, and the databases, I guess, are available online. I don't know. So that's helpful. You can just pop over there and see if whatever address you're coming from, if that's in their database because I guess what happens is like when they infect something, they're advertising renting it out, they're doing it based on that public IP address. So there is a check for it, but it's hard. I mean, it's a hard problem to solve. And even, Brian calls this out in his article that we normal consumers and even normal IT people don't really have the tools to figure out if we have a device that might be vulnerable. Do we have a device that's doing this? I mean, you have to get into, watching the traffic. But, to me, this idea, I think there's a very heavy line between you're mooching off of my, internet connection and now you're pivoting internal to my network, and you're able to do things, potentially even modifying, DNS and sending all of my home traffic DNS to a malicious server. And this, I think the spider web of impact of this is huge because we have all of these people working from home, and the home network is now an extension in some ways of your corporate protect surface.
I didn't even think about that aspect. Yeah. Yeah, a lot to untangle here. So again, links in the show notes. Check out the details. Let's pause for a word from sponsor Forward Networks. Forward Networks creates a digital twin of your network. Enterprises rely on Forward Networks for unified, trusted automation across distributed hybrid networks. Now, if you think a digital twin is just a network map or an inventory list, think again. Forward Networks' digital twin is a mathematically precise digital replica able to model all config and state data on every device and trace every possible packet path. With Forward Networks' digital twin, you can ensure that connectivity isn't disrupted, that security posture is unchanged, and compliance is maintained at all stages of change management. That's why enterprises rely on Forward Networks for unified, trusted automation across distributed hybrid networks. With Forward Networks' digital twin, you can eliminate change-related outages and the subsequent headlines. That's why Forward Networks' digital twin is the difference between risky automation and operational certainty. Learn more about how to protect your network and your sanity with Forward Networks. Just go to forwardnetworks.com/packetpushers. That's forwardnetworks.com/packetpushers. And now, back to the podcast. SANS has issued an alert about a low-cost KVM called Nano KVM made by a Chinese company called Sipeed, I think, Sipeed. The alert was prompted by a story in Tom's Hardware, which reported on a researcher who found some issues with the device, including things like a preset password, open SSH access, and, quote, the encryption key used to protect login passwords in the browser is hard-coded and identical across all devices. Some models also had a microphone built into the product, which was originally not listed in the product documentation, so you can see why some flags might have been raised. Tom's Hardware has since updated its article to note that Sipeed disputes the researcher's claims and that documentation has been updated to include the microphone, and also claiming that many of the other security issues have been addressed. Regardless, the SANS alert wants to let you know what's going on here and also provides some pretty good tips for locking down a KVM, whether you're using this cheap one or not.
Yeah. All of us, I think, use, like, when we have something that we've used in a business environment and we want to use it for our home labs, I think we all look for, what's something, it's just a home lab. It doesn't matter. I'm going to get something cheap. But then the question is, what are you, especially with the KVM, maybe it is just lab stuff and it's not a big deal. But again, it's like, what is the attack path from one of these things, especially if there's a microphone? That's pretty crappy right there.
That seems like a weird addition.
Yeah. So there are a lot of red flags with this. And, I think Sam's point is whether it's just this, one manufacturer, one device or not, that you do have to be careful about things that have connectivity and monitoring, basically, if you've got something like with a microphone or a camera built into it, to understand where they're coming from. And do you trust that manufacturer? And then can you put controls in place to ensure that that's not doing something it shouldn't be doing?
And I can also see reasons people would buy a cheap KVM for their day job if they, they don't want to get a call in the middle of the night to drive 30 miles to a location, but they also don't want to go through the procurement process to buy a $300 KVM, so they just pop one of these, a $30 one in, and maybe they only use it twice a year, but it seems fine, but it might not be. So
you bring up something interesting that I see a lot in talking to, because I kind of like have the one circle over here of the CISOs, And then the other circle over here with the technical professionals, which is where I came from. And it's really interesting to me because there's a lot of, I feel torn sometimes because there's a lot of IT professionals that want to, when they can't get approval for something, right? They're like, it's fine. I'll just use my own. I'll bring my own. I'll use my own, whatever, Wi-Fi testing tool, my own KVM, my own whatever. And now we're talking about introducing this into a business environment. And it could be anything. This is just one example, but it could be anything. And I think we all have to kind of start being aware that even when we have a really good intention, bringing stuff into an enterprise environment, and some environments are far more strict about this than others. But I think even in the absence of your employer being strict about it through, policy or technical controls, then it's our job as the technology professional or the security professional to kind of pay attention to this ourselves and fill that gap that our employer is not filling through policy or controls.
Yeah. I mean, that thing about policy, like if I need to get 6 people to sign off on this, $300 purchase, I might just decide to use a credit card and buy a cheap one because I've just saved myself 6 hours and a lot of frustration, and I'm getting my job done. So, yeah, policy has all kinds of impacts.
Yeah.
Moving on, Elon Musk's Grok AI tool is being used to generate non-consensual sexualized images on Twitter. Users are prompting the AI to manipulate existing photos, typically of women, to transform them into sexualized images, including undressing women down to bikinis or underwear or putting them in provocative poses. The British tech regulator Ofcom says it has made, quote, urgent contact with XAI, which is the Elon Musk's parent company of Grok. The X.com website posted on X that, quote, anyone using or prompting Grok to make illegal content will suffer the same consequences as if they uploaded the illegal content. As of recording time, it's not clear what steps have been taken by the owners of Grok to adjust its capability to prevent the creation of non-consensual sexualized images.
Yeah, this is not the first time. Now, I think the EU does, in my personal opinion, a little bit better job with, digital privacy and protection for its population than we do here in the US. And I would put Australia, New Zealand in that bucket as well. They pay more attention. So, I mean, just a few weeks ago, the EU slapped X with a pretty big fine. And I think this is kind of so we actually found this article in Rolling Stone, so that's the link that's in there. And then there's an interesting write-up from CopyLeaks that has a lot of analysis capability within this space. So that's pretty interesting. And they came up with, they basically ran analysis and figured out that, it seems like Grok is doing something like, I think it was 1 inappropriate image a minute. So, this is not great. Now, for anybody that's on the Packet Pushers Slack community, if you Drew's laughing.
I know it's coming.
This is my little bait for you over there. Just purely for science and research. I don't really use Twitter anymore. But I do still have an account. So I went over there and there is a little Grok icon thing. And I was like, well, let's just see. And so I found a picture of Drew on Twitter and said, hey, this is my co-host. Could you please... I gave it some instructions. It wasn't to disrobe him. It was to dress him differently. So if you're interested, you can go see Drew dressed as a Disney princess in the Slack community, and you are welcome.
Yeah. I'm just going to say I look good as a princess. Who knew? Who knew? Even with the beard. Now, playing devil's advocate a little bit here. I did see some other posts different places that this type of image manipulation, whether it's Grok or something else, is pretty common for the adult entertainment industry. So professionals that have presence online, OnlyFans or whatever, use it to change their wardrobe or positions, right? Which is consensual because it's an image of themselves and they're doing it. And I think, that's fine. But this whole thing of, doing it to other people's pictures is really
it's not okay. And children.
Yeah.
And that's what actually the part that really twisted me up. And that was the first link or article that I found, the news headline that I found is, there are, and I think that's actually where the EU and Ofcom comes in is, some people are using this to modify images as children, which is just sick and not okay on any planet anywhere.
Yeah. So obviously, like, Grok isn't doing this on its own. There are people who are asking Grok to do this. So they have some agency and some responsibility here. But the creators also have some agency and responsibility, and they could update the AI to put in guardrails. And I feel like a lot of these AI companies are just doing a massive social experiment on us with AI. And obviously, they can't anticipate every bad thing anyone's going to use this tool for. But have you been on the internet for the past 25 years? It's always sex is the first thing people use the internet for. So yeah, you could have anticipated this. And you could have tried to stop it at the outset. So
yeah, there was a quote from one of the people on Twitter that said, any new technology will first be used for ads, porn, and crime. And I'm like, yeah, that hits the nail on the head.
So they can't, I feel like if they're like, well, we didn't know people would do this, like, come on, give me a break.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Fortinet is grappling with a 5-year-old vulnerability in its SSL VPN product that's still being exploited. In July of 2020, a CVE was published regarding a configuration flaw that allowed users to bypass two-factor authentication on login. Fortinet patched the vulnerability in 2020. Bleeping Computer is reporting that more than 10,000 SSL VPN gateways are still vulnerable, and Fortinet has confirmed, quote, recent abuse of the vulnerability. So I know Fortinet gets a lot of grief, often well-earned, for these security vulnerabilities in its products, but this one's 5 years old. People have known about it for 5 years, and a software patch has been available since the summer of 2022, since the summer of 2020.
And I think so. I know it said in the article too that it was an SSL VPN product. I actually think it's the FortiGate firewall with SSL VPN enabled.
Probably, yeah.
So that's just something to to pay attention to. And the interesting thing to me in this was not that Fortinet has a multi-factor bypass vulnerability, but what this attack path actually is. So basically, if you have a FortiGate or something that's doing SSL VPN authentication in any product, in any firewall, you can bounce that off of some directory service, typically Active Directory on-prem, and or you can have local accounts. And so apparently, the weird thing is that the local accounts in this version of the FortiGate that's impacted is case sensitive. So if it's like, D Murray, but it's capital D and lowercase Murray or some, any, if the case doesn't match, it does not match to that local auth. And so then it falls back to the LDAP group or whatever, directory it's connected to, where typically multi-factor is not enforced because we tend to do that differently. And so if somebody has scraped credentials, they can just basically get straight in this method. So there's lots of, I know you're saying you're not faulting Fortinet, but it is strange to me that that their local user auth is not that it has a case sensitivity match. Like to me, that's ludicrous for a username. And I do think that one of their mitigations is, you should definitely patch it if it's not been patched for 4 years. There's some other problems. But I do think that there is also a setting for case sensitivity. And I believe that was in the Fortinet PCERT advisory as well. So if for some reason you can't do an immediate patch or you've got to wait for a maintenance window, go see if there is a disabled case sensitivity.
That 6-year maintenance window cycle? Dude,
well, I'm just being realistic. Like if you have to go through a request and you have to wait, but you're listening to this and you're like, oh crap, at least, if there is a option to disable the case sensitivity, just go do that, at least in the interim while you're waiting. And that will, at least decrease that exposure. You're going to be exposed to other things if you haven't updated it and patched it in 4 years, but that'll solve this one. We do what we can.
I have to remember, we're extending people grace. So the 6-year patch window, I get it. Got to do what you got to do. All right, JJ, we're going to get into our rapid fire section where we'll try to get through a multiplicity of stories as quick as we can. First,
multiplicity.
Multiplicity. I got the vocabulary. Microsoft Teams is going to enable security features by default starting January 12th of this year. That's 2026. Those features include malicious URL detection, warning users about suspicious URLs and messages, and a system for reporting false positives. But, JJ, there is a catch here, yes?
Yeah, the one little catch is that they are changing the default settings. If you're not using default, like if you don't have Teams security set up with defaults, and probably most of us don't, they're not going to go muck around with your custom settings, which is nice. But what that means is you're going to need to, before that time, go in and go check your settings. Either put them to default if you feel like that's the right thing to do, or probably more appropriately, like just go ahead and tune those things to match what the default will include. But just understand that if you've changed anything and you think that you're going to get this new protection by default, you won't if you have modified anything.
Yeah, I think that's good to know. I mean, tip of the hat for Microsoft Teams for putting these features in the default setting.
Oh, yeah, the ones that should have been there from the beginning. Yeah, great. Good job, Microsoft. Thanks.
Grace. It's all about grace. But yeah, if you have made changes, then you don't get this default setting. You got to go do the settings yourself. Speaking of default settings, in December, Cisco issued a warning that attackers are targeting the Cisco Async OS software, which runs on Cisco Secure Email Gateway and Cisco Secure Email and Web Manager, including physical and virtual versions. The thing to note is that attackers are going after devices with some specific settings. Namely, the product has to have the spam quarantine feature turned on, and that feature must be reachable via the internet. Cisco notes that the spam quarantine feature is not enabled by default. So some more default settings issues for you to check out.
Yeah, and I'm not familiar with this product. However, I will tell you that most email security products, you do use spam quarantine and you do enable it so that your users can get to it and manage their own boxes. So even though it's not enabled by default, I imagine that that's probably an extremely common configuration. And if left unpatched or unresolved, then this attack does allow arbitrary executions with root privileges on the underlying operating system. So definitely patch that up.
Yeah, and Cisco is noting that there is a named hacking group that they are following that is looking to take advantage of this setting. So there is actual attempts out there.
Yeah, active exploit.
Browser security company Push Security has published a blog about a browser-based attack that, quote, phishes an OAuth token on a target app by getting the victim to copy and paste a URL containing OAuth key material into a phishing page. They've dubbed this attack technique consent fix. We teased this earlier in the show.
Yeah, I'm not going to run through the details of this. It's similarly long, but I definitely would say go look at the Push Security blog on consent fix. They're the ones that saw this. Because what happens is when these things happen purely in the browser, your other tools don't pick them up. And this is, similarly full credential theft. But basically, if the user copies a URL, under these specific conditions of the way they've set this up, that URL does contain OAuth token material. And I don't think most users would think anything about copying and pasting URL because you're thinking, oh, there's nothing secret in there.
Right.
But in this particular case, the way they have architected this, there is because of the Azure CLI thing happening. So long story short, definitely go check that out. It is similar but completely different from the one we talked about earlier.
Yeah, and we've got that blog link in the show notes. Moving on, researchers at Koi Security have identified a malicious NPM package that looks like a legitimate package for WhatsApp and actually performs some of the functions it says to perform, but it also steals your credentials, intercepts messages, harvests contacts, and more.
Yeah, I didn't dig a lot into this one, but I just thought it was, we've talked a lot about NPM malicious packages, and this kind of fit in there. The fact that it had been downloaded 50 or 60,000 times, and that it had been in the package for something like 6 months, I think was pretty interesting that had not been discovered. But it says that the malicious package steals authentication tokens and session keys, complete message history, past and present, full contact with phone numbers, media files, document, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I know some people use WhatsApp for, chit-chatting with people. I have run into professionals and customers that use it to send what they think is, securely send maybe a password or credential to somebody that they're working with for something. So, and you.
My understanding is WhatsApp is actually legitimately end-to-end encrypted.
Yeah. Well, yes and no. Not the way that Signal is.
Okay.
So there are kind of pathways into that stream, and you can do other things like add other devices and stuff. But if you download this malicious package and it's scraping everything from your device, it doesn't
if it's on the device,
matter
it
if it's
doesn't
end-to-end
matter.
encrypted because it's
Exactly.
on the device that has access to that key.
Yeah, and this is part of a larger story. We talked about it some last year about these malicious packages that either are like a fork of a legitimate package or are released as a legitimate package that actually provides some functions, and then once it's built up some trust in the community, the developer then goes in and either adds or turns on sort of malicious capabilities. It is a problem, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it again. Our last two items, I guess, do we have fun items on this show? But we could put them in a sort of generally fun category, I guess. First one, this story came out in October of last year, but it's kind of a wild piece from Wired about how the hosts of high-stakes private poker games hacked an automated card shuffling machine to give some players information about the cards that other players were holding. Using these and other techniques to cheat, they were allegedly able to fleece players for tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. The U.S. Department of Justice has unsealed an indictment against 31 people, which included alleged members of organized crime families and NBA coaches.
Yeah, I think the total number in this is $7 million that have been allegedly, basically, stolen through cheating. So the long story made short, and if you have access to Wired, I definitely recommend reading. Wired does a freaking fantastic job.
They do,
in their article. They're not just like little summaries of other people's articles. They actually have staff that goes and researches these things and does a really bang up job writing them up.
I am a subscriber.
Yeah, it's one of the few things that I still subscribe to. But so at Black Hat in 2023, it was an IO Active team that had kind of did a proof of concept for. There's a deck shuffler. I think Deckmate 2 is the model. That has all of these capabilities. It's kind of like a smart shuffler, and lots of casinos and places use it. But it has a camera inside for validating the shuffling process and making sure all of the cards are there. But you can access that camera from outside the device if you're crafty. So obviously that's harder to do in a casino where you've got lots of controls in place and lots of security, et cetera, et cetera. But in these private poker games, where this is just, this Deckmate 2 is just it's just a
just
normal.
There. It's next to the drinks.
Yeah, it's just a little shuffler. But if it's your private party, it's easy for somebody to access that camera, push the output to an app and parse through it. And then even if that deck is cut, because the camera has seen the full sequence of cards, exactly what's coming next. Basically, you can see and or predict every card in every person's hand at every moment. So, I hate I hate to say good job. People don't cheat, don't lie, don't steal, but however, that was kind of crafty. I thought it was interesting, and $7 million is a lot. So there's dozens, scores of people that have been indicted now. But just a funny story, a really interesting way about how they went about it. So definitely check that out.
Yeah. And our last story is about a video game. It's called Rainbow Six Siege. It came under siege by attackers who exploited a known MongoDB vulnerability to get access to the company's systems. But instead of stealing data, the attackers apparently used their control to ban and unban players and distribute $2 billion in in-game credits to every single user. Ubisoft, the game's creator, had to shut down the entire game to address the issue. I think it was down for about a day and then has come back online. The credits were revoked, but Ubisoft also noted it wouldn't ban any player that had spent any of the illicitly gained credits before they were revoked.
Yeah. Oh God, this is so funny to me. And I feel like, finally, I kept saying the MongoDB vulnerability, and it's so far removed from what most of us have to deal with that this is a nice little tie-in. But they said that the 2 billion credits, credit tokens you get inside the game, for each player was valued at 13 million. And so,
like in actual money, like if I had bought 2 billion in credits in the game, it would have cost me $13 million. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was almost $340 trillion of tokens that they gave out. So kind of funny. It'll be interesting to follow up on this later and understand who did this and why, because they didn't do normal attackery thingies, right? They didn't ransom, they didn't leak data, they didn't
steal credentials.
Yeah, they didn't.
And stuff.
It's just manipulated.
They were just they were like Robin Hood. They went in and they were like, "Hey, have some tokens." Whee!
It is like Robin Hood, yeah. Oh God. Anyway, so yeah, if you play Rainbow Six Siege, then that's what happened in the game.
Yeah. All right. That wraps up our news for this episode. Thank you for being here for the first show for our new year of 2026. If you get a topic you want us to cover or a comment or correction, as always, packetpushers.net/follow-up. And just to let you know, Packet Protector is part of a bigger Packet Pushers podcast network with more than a dozen technical podcasts on things like, of course, security, IPv6, networking, DevOps, and more. We also have an industry blog, 2 weekly newsletters, a community Slack group, which enticement has a photo of me as a princess if you really want to see it.
Two photos.
Two. That's right. 2 for the price of nothing. A YouTube channel, an IRC group. You can find it all at packetpushers.net, all free with no login required. Thanks for listening.